This episode is brought to you by Morty, Buzzshot, Cogs by Clockwork Dog, and Patreon supporters like you. Welcome to the Reality Escape Pod, Key Moments of Season 8 episode. I'm Steve Ewing, the editor of the show. On a typical episode, hosts David Spira and PG Law explore immersive gaming from all angles, with guests who really know their stuff. In this episode, we thought it would be worthwhile to look back at Season 8 and highlight the most interesting, entertaining, and impactful moments. Season 8 was an excellent mix of puzzle creators, escape room owners, game designers, and even a celebration of the 10th anniversary of RoomEscapeArtist.com. The season started off with a bang, as David and PG welcomed back Alon Lee, creator of Exploding Kittens. Alon was Reality Escape Pod's very first official guest, way back in February 2021. He's been very busy since then, creating an animated version of Exploding Kittens for Netflix and a party game version of Survivor. In this clip, he delves into his passion for an aspect of tabletop games that often receives meager attention.
I imagine that you spend a lot of time thinking about the wants and needs of less experienced players. What do you think are those wants and needs?
Okay, so less experienced players are the majority of our audience. So yes, I absolutely spend time not thinking about them, but obsessing over them. Most of our audience, when they buy a game, it's oftentimes either the first game they've ever purchased, or at least the first one they've played in 20 years. So that's a tough crowd. I think about, this gets into a whole, okay, I'm excited to talk about this. We have to talk about instructions.
Oh, thank God.
This is what this was all building to. Go on. Because I looked at every single instructions that you have made before this interview, and they are never longer than one page front and back.
Yeah.
And that is damn impressive.
Yeah, but they sure didn't start that way.
Oh, I know it. Talk to us about that.
I love instructions. I love them. They are so hard to write. Okay, here's another thing I'm not supposed to talk. I'm so glad I don't have a PR person on this call, because I would be censored left and right here. We're working on a Survivor game right now.
Ooh.
Yeah, I've been hoping for this for years.
Yeah. And the instructions for that game are on version 133 this morning. 133, and many of those were complete rewrites. Throw everything away, let's start all over again. And I love it. I love it. When I get notes the next morning from the previous night's test, I get so excited. It's like, I get to rewrite these again. I get to see what word needs to be tweaked. We don't need, we shouldn't say eliminated. We got to say voted out, because in the previous sentence, we said voted out and not eliminated. And now there's a conflict. Love it. I think that I am in this very fortunate position to train people to play games for often the first time ever, or at least the first time in recent memory, which means that they need to open a piece of paper. It can't look intimidating. It has to look very achievable. They have to get from the start to the end and go through the process of having no idea what this is to being an absolute professional and able to play immediately. And that is probably a good 60% of what we do for a living right now. Write those instructions and perfect those instructions. I met with, I'm not going to mention any names, other game designers in larger companies. And I asked them what the instruction process is like over there. And the answer is unanimous. It's, we wrote the thing, we tested it once, we rewrote it, we shipped it.
And it shows.
Can you?
And it shows.
Right. I cannot imagine instructions going out before version 70. It would never happen.
Most tabletop games feel like someone spent years making the game and minutes making the instructions.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing about it is that the instructions are the gateway and the barrier for you to start playing the game.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
David strikes me as an instruction reader. I am not
at all. I hate it.
I'm not an instruction reader. In fact, I recently lost a social deduction game because I did not read the nuance of what my character did, and I had the wrong assumptions.
Yeah. So when I'm doing a playtest tomorrow, when I sit down at a playtest, I put the game in front of people, I put the instructions in front of people, and I say, okay, here's the deal. I have very few requests of you, but here's what I need. I want you to read these instructions in the same way you would read them as if you just opened the box. I want you to pretend I'm not here. As things are confusing, as you have thoughts, say those things out loud. That's the only unnatural thing I would like you to do, is no internal thoughts. Internal thoughts don't help anybody. So whatever's going on in your head, whatever confusion, just say it out loud. Maybe you'll find the answer. Maybe you won't. Maybe you'll be totally confused. You can ask me any questions you want, and I will do my absolute best to completely ignore you because I am not here. And that process is why we do 70 plus versions of the instructions, because every single time we will find 20 new mistakes, 20 new points of confusion. I will fix those. I'll put it through another test. Hey, guess what? I just created 20 new mistakes by making those changes to the last time. And that's just a requirement. That is what you absolutely have to go through, so that when you get one of our games and you open that box and you read those instructions, all I can guarantee is that if you are confused anywhere, you are the first person to be confused in that place. It has at least never happened before, because it happened before I fixed it.
Survivor, The Tribe Has Spoken is available now at explodingkittens.com, along with the creatively named Hurry Up Chicken Butt and Let's Hit Each Other with Fake Swords, both mentioned later in the episode. Be sure to have a listen. Magician David Kwong has always been passionate about word puzzles. From a young age, he played Scrabble with his mother and still calls her every day to finish the New York Times spelling bee. He creates crosswords that break the rules and even builds crosswords live on stage. But he's perhaps best known for his show, The Enigmatist. It's the intersection of his many talents and interests, but describing it is difficult, even for him. In episode 2, David asks him to give it a shot.
I and so many in the immersive world learned about you back in 2019 with the introduction of your show, The Enigmatist, in New York City. Since then, you have performed runs of the show in Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., and most recently, Chicago. It's an unusual show, and I'm curious to hear how you explain it to those who haven't been.
It's not easy. It's hard for me to tell my parents what I do every day. I call it an immersive evening of magic, puzzles, and cryptography. That's the official kind of tagline, but I have to say, it's a show about me doing everything I love on stage, which is magic tricks, puzzles, and history. I talk about the history of America's first code breakers, and it's interactive. Everyone has an answer sheet at their chair with a pencil, and I am doing magic tricks, and then I'm throwing puzzles up on the screen, and I'm asking people to stand up if they know the answer. I'm having you write down answers, and they all come together with a meta puzzle at the end, the answer of which unlocks the box on stage. So there are surprises in the box. And the whole thing starts with a mini escape room. When I first came up with the idea for the Enigmatist, I wanted it to be an actual escape room, but I quickly learned that you can't move 100 people through an escape room.
Throughput would be an issue. So it's like a collection of different puzzles, and everyone can go up to each one independently and solve it.
They're all on the wall, so there's no turning of dials or opening of drawers. You can have 20 people standing in front of a wall looking at the puzzle and working on it individually. It was originally at the Highline Hotel, which was the perfect venue for it because it's this Gothic style.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. Former nunnery where you're walking through the courtyard and then you're winding through this dark corridor and you emerge into this space. You were greeted with the first room was the puzzle room. And then if you were quick to solve puzzles, then you could go have a drink at the bar or help other people. And then the third room was the showroom where you were admitted to the room if you had solved the 4 puzzles.
From my perspective, The Enigmatist is uniquely your show. It's the rare stage magic show where, sitting in the audience, you intuitively understand that the performer on stage is the show. And if someone else performed it, it is no longer that show. What was it like developing this?
I think you got that exactly right because, unfortunately, I can't really scale this and enterprise it out to other people. It's just me.
Yeah, I can't imagine you being like, oh, I have enigmatist puzzles and I'm going to put them in packages and sell them and other magicians are going to go on stage and do the thing. Not only does it feel like a bad idea, but it doesn't feel possible.
Like I said, it's a show about everything I love. And the best parts are the spontaneous moments in the show where I'm just riffing on weird little Scrabble definitions and crossword clues and making chemical element jokes. And all the people that love this stuff are coming out.
Yeah, it's a show that attracts the people who are going to love this. I can relate to this in that we put on all of these escape room events, these tours and conventions, and we end up with this audience that is like, oh, everyone is really happy to be here. Everyone is also responding to the kinds of jokes that we're making on stage that no one else in the world will appreciate except for the kinds of people who will walk into the doors of our events. I very much feel and can relate to the audience building that you're doing. And then the way that the show is like reinforcing the identities and feelings of that audience. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it's really a safe space for brainy people. And it evolved into that, right? The spirit was always there, but it just organically became more and more that. And it started in New York as an evening show. It was 7 p.m. and then again, quick turnaround, 9:30 p.m. I did 2 a night on the weekends. And what happened is that people started to bring their smart 11 and 12-year-old kids, and those kids would start cracking the meta puzzle before the adults. And it was so wonderful when I got to call a young person up on stage to unlock that box, which I said was the big thing everyone's trying to figure out. And it was the best moment when a kid did it first.
Tune in to the rest of the episode to learn how David Kwong suffered an eye injury from overexposure to lights around his computer screen and had to spend months in almost complete darkness. In episode 3, we welcomed Robert, better known as Fro Myers, co-owner of the iconic Boston escape room company Boxaroo. Boxaroo is home to one of the most beautifully crafted games I've experienced, Storyteller's Secret. David asked Fro to reflect on what makes Boxaroo's games so consistently special.
One of the hallmarks of a Boxaroo game, really dating back to the very beginning, is that your games always seem to showcase this blend of beautiful interaction design, a clear narrative, blend of kind of robust software and mechanical engineering, and all of this was there, at least from my perspective, on day one. We've always viewed Boxaroo as this kind of total package company. Where was all of that coming from?
First of all, thank you for the wonderful words. That's definitely something we've always strived for. A lot of it has just been our strengths, describing the mechanical interactions, the software, the show controls, the lighting and sound. These are all things that we had the background for. The classes I overlapped with Victor with were design in the mechanical engineering side of things and technical theater classes. We were literally working on sound and lighting and set design in these shows for these classes, which they were very interesting stories. We had some interesting teachers, but we learned a lot from it, and especially the things we wanted to carry forward into this endeavor, as well as having that sort of common design language on how to make user-centric design in terms of what is the guest going to find joy in? Where are they going to find the whimsy in what they're doing, the delight, the emotional reaction if we're trying to produce an effect that is going to shock or awe someone, and bringing that to the forefront of the experience.
I love hearing that. User-centric design is what I practice in my regular career as a UX designer and product designer. It's never come up before explicitly on the show, more implicitly, but you're the first guest we've ever had bring it up. Talk to me a little bit more about how you're applying that when you're designing a Boxaroo game.
Sure. I think the process of designing the game starts with essentially, what do we want them to experience? Some people say, like, what is the wow moment that they're going to do? But we're even more just like, what are the guests doing in the space? What does them solving the puzzle look like? What is the story of the guest going through it? Not necessarily the narrative of the room or anything like that. It's what is the user going to be doing? And framing the design in terms of that helps us approach it more as a product designing experience, but it does let us highlight all of the elements that we really want to accentuate, or if there are things we're concerned about, if there's unknowns that we have to solve for, highlighting those early on in the design process so we can address them.
That makes sense. So you're really focusing in on what the user, or in this case, the player, is doing, what their arc is going to be, what their actions are going to be, how you're capturing their attention and focusing them on the moments you want to leave an impact.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Fro just finished helping run the MIT Mystery Hunt this year as part of last year's winning team, Death and Mayhem. Later in this episode, he talks about his preparation for that, as well as the creation of his very own pandemic mystery hunt, Colby's Curious Cook-Off. 2020 was a big year for Jackbox Games. Their collection of hilarious online party games brought people out of isolation and allowed them to laugh together virtually. Jackbox creative director and product manager Brooke Bright had a hand in making some of the best games in the series. She joined us for episode 4.
You're a longtime Second City performer. Talk to me about the way that Second City influences your creative process.
I moved to Chicago and I realized this weekend. I didn't realize it this weekend. I knew it, but I said it out loud this weekend and then it occurred to me and washed over me like a wave. I've been in Chicago 20 years and moved here for comedy to perform at Second City and feel very fortunate that was something I was able to do because it is a very small opportunity that not everybody, and there's a million hilarious people that I know that work and live in Chicago and have moved on to like LA, New York and been very successful and never worked at Second City. So it's not the thing you have to do, but it was a goal and I really wanted to do it. And I was in the touring company for 3 years. I've done so many corporate gigs where you're going and doing a custom song or script for a company and you're like, I don't even know what these words mean, but they're loving it. And so I did that for years and then eventually got the offer to be in the resident cast of the ETC stage, which is there's 2 stages, a main stage and ETC. And I got that offer for ETC. I also got that offer when I was 9 months pregnant. So it was a wild journey and was very grateful that I was able to do that. I did 2 reviews there. I started a month after I had a baby. And I think it also informed what I had to say at that time and what kind of my perspective was, which was nothing I could have predicted given the timing and was really fun and cool opportunity to be able to go do a show and write a scene about a breast pump. And it was like, this is very real to me and will be very real to a bunch of people in this audience. So it was really cool. So I did that. And then after that, I think my sensibility and what I bring into the party game space is just a lot of those joyful improv mechanics and also the willingness to try things and not be so precious about it. Like when we're creating a Second City show, people may or may not know this, but a show gets locked down at a certain point, and that's the review that opens and gets performed for maybe a year, maybe a little bit less. But before that, they turn over the show from the old show by slowly replacing the scenes. So a new cast, maybe it's some of the old cast, some of the new cast, they'll start by doing the old show and then they'll start trying out things. So it's like you put it maybe in the improv set, maybe you put it directly into the show, but you're just slowly turning over that material until it transforms into a completely different review. So that is a period of time that we're called being in process. So early on, I told this story the other day and it brings me great joy. I don't know if you know Jack McBrayer, who is a very, very funny comedian. He was Kenneth from 30 Rock. He was the Page.
Yeah, of course.
Like he's been in a million things. He's the voice of Fix It Felix and Wreck-It Ralph.
Yes.
He's
Okay. Yes.
hilarious human being. I came to see ETC when I was in college and came to Second City, and he was on stage and had done a scene that was like the funniest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And I was crying, laughing, and took that with me and carried it in my heart for years. Then cut to, I'm working in the box office of a different theater over at IO. as an intern, and he walks in, and I just fangirled. I was like, I have to tell you. And I was telling him the scene I saw you do. It like was life-changing and I loved it. And he told me, he goes, we only did that scene 3 times, and 2 times it didn't work and 1 time it worked. And you were there the night that it worked. And that's incredible. And we just started talking about it. And it was such like a wild thing to have this very unique shared experience with this human that no one else except for the people in that theater had seen that scene and ever would, because apparently it didn't do very well every other time they tried it. But since then, like I've talked to him a handful of times. He'll see me and go, zombie grandma. And I'm like, yeah. We just have this weird connection. So when I did Second City, and even in my work after that, I have this joy of just trying something and saying, I don't know, just put it out there, see if it sticks, and someone might remember it. It might be special to someone. And now in applying to the gaming world, you need like more solid hits. So like in the way that Zombie Grandma went away for that Second City show, it probably also wouldn't stay, but you might learn something from it and then it turns into something else. So it's just that willingness to try things and not being afraid of failing to then get to the good stuff that really sticks with me.
Episode 4 is full of behind-the-scenes insights on what it takes to bring a Jackbox game to life and how to keep things fresh after producing more than 50 games. Belgium's Jeroen van Hasselt of the company Entered is a true out-of-the-box thinker when it comes to immersive experiences. Their game, I Can Hear You, challenged participants to avoid antagonists by silently navigating their space. The Nightmare of Evelyn's Shadow took over an entire hotel wing during COVID to embody the imagination of a fictional horror writer. And Demise of the Gricers is something else entirely. From episode 5, here's David taking the plunge into the world of the Gricers.
Demise of the Gricers is set in a large train depot, indoor, outdoor, featuring real trains. You've confirmed earlier that the setting came before the concept. I'm curious to hear more about the origins of this.
Yes, we were extremely lucky because it just happened that persons of the municipality of us, where this train hangar and station is located, were playing our previous game, I Can Hear You, and they loved it. And some of them were horror enthusiasts. And they just asked us, we have this hangar here, which is empty. Can you build the same game over there as well? And we were like, we can, but we'd rather build something new and unique. And they just gave us the green light, which is nice. I'm not sure if back then we knew what we were getting into, but I'm happy we persevered. And I do have some photos still of this, but the hangar was completely empty, bar one locomotive.
That's my next question is, where did all the trains come from?
So the trains were already in the area. Outside, we viewed all the trains. We picked the ones that were the most empty because they gave the most opportunity to do something with it. And obviously, we also wanted like a nice variance of locomotives and wagons and different wagons. So some would have passenger compartments and some would have like tables, a bar, stuff like this. Very cool. And we drove these inside with the locomotive. And yeah, that's how we started.
Where do you casually find a person who can operate a train?
Again, super lucky. Somebody from the municipality was in contact with one of these and knew because they operated the station for a long time.
My other biggest question when I first learned about this game is, what the heck is a Gricer?
Yeah, that's actually one of the first questions a lot of people ask. A Gricer is... Okay, maybe I should tell how I came to the word Gricer, because before we started building this game, we start with a vision. So this was even before the mechanic. And the vision for this game consisted out of 3 design pillars. The first design pillar was we wanted to be a horror game, a real-life horror game. We wanted to be tense. We wanted to be a different kind of horror than I Can Hear You. The second design pillar was trains. We knew we wanted to do something with trains. Not just the mechanics, but also the story, the theme, the things that you're doing. I wanted to create a small world or the feeling of a world. Not total open world, not sandbox like LARP, but very curated and designed experience into a world where you have the feeling there's always something more to explore and give you options and freedom instead of a linear path that you're following. Those three were the core pillars. And I already knew from my experience from video games that to create a world, you really need world building. And that's where I started with doing research. What is this story going to originate from? And that's when I came across a Gricer, a very obscure term that originated in the 60s in England. And they gave this term to rail enthusiasts, railway fanatics. This was a time when airplanes and automobiles, their popularity was on the rise. And before that time, everybody kind of loved trains, but automobiles became more accessible for the general public as well as airplanes. And these Gricers, they start to stand out more. You can even find an old news article in a paper where somebody's saying like, oh, we should save these Gricers and put them in a zoo to study. And I mean, that's something you could never say in this age anymore. But I thought it was interesting because they also did some crimes back in the day. Petty crimes like hacking the radio communication or stealing of a train, nothing too big. But after this, the Gricers kind of disappeared, the term disappeared, and they weren't really known for anything anymore. And that's when we started to build a fiction. I thought, what if these Gricers really started hiding in the darker places of society, doing their own thing? And what if they've been doing that for years? How would that look? What kind of culture would they develop? What if they really love trains so much that it's more important than anything else? What would that mean? And what if they would form their own cult even and make it more extreme? Because we're building a horror game, so it has to be extreme. And it has to turn into something savage. And they believe in something and it really creates friction and conflict with the rest of society. And then it became interesting. And I think that's the question we asked ourselves. And that's what you're going to find out in Demise of the Gricers.
I think that really works because it sounds like such a weird, crazy, fantastical thing, but because it does, in fact, have its roots in reality, in something that actually did exist, that line starts to blur a little bit of what is real and is it possible that this could have actually existed? And I think it really did help. And you provide a lot of the backstory beforehand to players as well, before they even come in.
But I was worried about this, and we really had to build this up slowly, drip feed them from the first moment we could about this story, what they're going to do, and own it to the max.
Episode 5 is packed with great stories and thoughtful discussion about trying something new in the escape room and immersive world. In fact, Jeroen is obsessed with trying new things. Stick around after the credits in this episode to hear about the time he tried a sandwich with chocolate paste, olives, and melted cheese.
I used to wish every day for an app that does exactly what Morty does. It lets me track all of the escape rooms I've played, and I also use it to find games around me, including game reviews and open time slots. It even has discount codes. So if you're an escape room owner and you want to get your games on there, they have a partnership program for you. And if you're already using Morty and you love all that it has to offer, you can support your favorite app by becoming a member today.
I believe in Morty so much that I have a stake in it as an advisor, and I always enjoy the time that I get to spend giving the Morty team my input and suggestions. Start discovering and tracking your immersive outings today. You can learn more at morty.app/repod. That's REPOD to sign up and get a special badge for our listeners. We'd also like to thank longtime sponsor BuzzShot. BuzzShot is escape room software powering business growth, player marketing, and improving the customer experience. They offer an assortment of pre- and post-game features, including robust waiver management, branded team photos, and streamlined review management.
Streamline your marketing and grow your escape room business. REPOD listeners get an extended free trial and 20% off your first 3 months with no setup fees or hidden charges. Visit buzzshot.com/repod. That's REPOD to learn more. We'd also like to thank sponsor Cogs. Are you looking to up your game when it comes to creating a more theatrical experience for your escape room or immersive show? Cogs by Clockwork Dog is a software-hardware platform that makes it easy to create a show with lighting and sound cues, whether you're totally new to escape room tech or a seasoned engineer.
Get the COG starter set for only $130 plus free shipping to the USA. This bundle is usually valued at $257. You can learn more and purchase your starter set at cogs.show. Use code REPOD at checkout. That's REPOD.
Our heartfelt thanks to sponsors Morty, Buzzshot, and Cogs by Clockwork Dog. This show would not be possible without their support. You can find links and details in the show notes. Supporting our sponsors supports this podcast.
If you're a new listener to Reality Escape Pod, you may not know that it's the official podcast of roomescapeartist.com, or that David and his wife Lisa created the site 10 years ago. Well, in episode 6, they celebrated the 10th anniversary with insights on why they don't use a rating system for reviews, how Room Escape Artist has affected the industry, and how to work with your spouse. But I thought it would be good for everyone to hear the origin story of how the site came to be. In this clip, PG starts by referencing Recon, the reality escape convention put on by Room Escape Artist.
At Recon, you open by revealing that Room Escape Artists only exists because, and I quote, "a friend got a urinary tract infection." I've heard about the origin story of Room Escape Artist a lot, but I never quite heard it told that way. Do you want to share with our podcast audience?
Yeah, that is 100% true. We went to San Francisco in the summer of 2014, and we had already played some escape rooms. We knew that San Francisco was one of the only other places in the US that we could play, which was why we went. We were staying with some old friends of mine, and we took them to their first game. They loved it. We went back to their place, and we were talking like, hey, would it be possible for us to go and play another game? And Lisa and I already had plans with another one of my old friends for that night. And that was the only window that we were going to have to play another game. And so the answer was no. And then that friend called up and had to cancel because she had a UTI. And we sat around with our friends with all of this newfound time. And we did two things. One was we found another game that we could play that night at Ohm Escape. We had Sarah Zhang on a few seasons back. We played at her place. And then the second thing that we did, because we had a lot of time, was the four of us sat on their couch and Googled escape room and every city and state we could in the US and assembled a list. That list eventually became a map. And that was the first thought that we had was if we wanted this list, other people probably would want it too, which is where we get into the part of the story that we've told 1,000 times. But yeah, we had that free time because of a UTI. And I want to add, because after I told that story, there are a few people who are in the escape room community who people know I have known for longer than escape rooms have been around. And I just want to put all speculation to rest. No one that you know who is active in the escape room community is the person in question. No one.
Spoiler alert, it was David. There's no shame to having UTIs, by the way.
There is not. But mostly just stop hassling my friends who have been around because I know a few of them have gotten questions.
So creating the list, did you do that before you had written your first escape room review?
I put out 3 posts prior to this on my personal blog about escape rooms. One was just a post about having played my first game. It wasn't a review or anything, although I was gushing over it because I just fell in love. The second was the review that we wrote of Escape from the Werewolf Village. And the third was, it was an escape room primer because this just sounds so silly at this point. We kept taking friends to play escape rooms locally in New York, and very quickly, people were getting intimidated to go with us because we were experts because we had played a few games. And so we decided to make this little primer to give them a sense of what they were getting into, what being a good teammate looks like, what not to do. We were just trying to make our friends a little bit more comfortable to come play with us. So those were the 3 posts I had written on my personal blog prior to making the map.
It's useful. I remember going into my first escape room, Miles Nye took me, and I was feeling a little bit unsure. And so remembering those days, it really helped that he sat me down and gave me like, Miles, top 10 tips for how to beat any escape room. And it really helped. It's useful, and they still are, I think they still apply today. They're pretty basic, but when you're wandering into the unknown, you're grasping at literally anything that will shed light.
For years, we gave all of our teams tips before we played. We might send them that article, or we might just talk to them about it when we were booking the game or on the way to the game, right when we got there, as we were getting ready. We were using those tips with everyone because people were uncomfortable.
I also think that nowadays, even for people who are really experienced, and having been on your escape room tours, David, I do think that the way you set expectations before going into play a game really helps also. So it's not like we need tips for playing, but it's more of the right way to approach this game to maximize your level of fun.
It's that, and it's also one of the things we found from running tours and also playing with so many different people is that different play groups have different norms for how they approach escape rooms. Some are really aggressive, some are really passive, some are totally fine with spinning the last digit on a lock, some are not. Some teams, if there's a logic puzzle, it's always this person. If there's a math puzzle, it's always that person. Whatever it is, those kinds of things can crash into other teams' norms. And so we have, instead of giving a lot of tips on how to win, we now do a lot more of normalizing, like, this is how we play, and this is what we value when we play.
Did you know that people will email David and Lisa thinking that they're escape room corporate? It's true, and it's a great story that you can hear elsewhere in episode 6. How can one describe the career of Unique Trapman O'Brien? You can talk about his work performing the immersive pieces Undersigned and Tell a Library, but he'd probably rather you just experience them. In episode 7, one thing he will talk about is the concept of putting in reps as an immersive performer, and more importantly, being so good you pass the bladder test.
I talk a lot with immersive creators about the bell curve, which is that anytime you do anything, any bit, any show, repeatedly enough, with enough iterations, there emerges some kind of bell curve of you're like, okay, this thing is going to happen in most of the iterations. And then these things are a little more rare, but they'll happen. And so you start to get really good at being just a step ahead of things, or seeing something and kind of helping guide it to what it's going to be. It's funny because like the seductive thing about it is it starts to feel like clairvoyance, and you can really sell a participant on, wow, how, this actor, how is she always 2 steps ahead of me? I think the dangerous thing is if you're not careful, you can consciously or unconsciously reduce the range of what's possible, because you will naturally slide things towards something you've seen before as opposed to really noticing what's going on. But oddly enough, for all that I was like in a kind of formal boot camp for a little while for immersive stuff, I really credit my time building immersive stuff in nightclubs and things and parties for a lot of my learning. And that's because I believe in reps more than anything. I was working at the time with a circus company. It was being directed by Caitlin Chen, who now runs a different circus company. But we were getting commissioned to build these things. I think anyone who's been to a certain kind of party knows the feeling of like, there's an actor here and they want you to tell them a secret.
So when you said you were involved in the nightlife circus scene, I thought you were using the word circus metaphorically, like, it was a circus, but you meant a literal circus.
Yeah, like a literal circus. It was the in-house circus company. They were called You Are So Lucky. They wanted to have like an in-house circus. And so it was a lot of acrobats and aerialists and hand balancers and go-go dancers and people from across the spectrum of skills. And then me, and like kind of all I could do was talk. Eventually, I was told by a couple people that it would help us a lot if you had any skills.
Okay, but you are damn good at talking.
Well, but you got to get, because if somebody can do backflips and fit through the eye of a needle next to you and all you can do is talk, you better start training.
Yeah, but I'll say that you have us, the participants, go through all of that kind of mentally in one of your experiences from what I've seen.
But I would say, again, I credit that to reps, right? In the nightlife scene, doing this circus stuff, building things, I felt like I got as close as you can get to theater for young audiences without the young audiences, because most of my audiences were like drunk, stoned, or crossfaded, right? We're like people at a party. They were just trying to find the bathroom and they would see something and they'd be like, huh.
I'm more curious about this than my urge to urinate.
For now, right? And that's honestly, there's a way that as a performer, some part of me actually loves that. Some part of me is like, yeah, can I beat bladder in terms of pure entertainment appeal?
Okay, I gotta ask really quickly, what do you mean by rep?
Oh, repetitions. It's the whole like Bruce Lee thing of fear not the man who knows 1,000 kicks, fear the man who's done one kick 10,000 times. I mean it in terms of, I think I mean it in terms of like being adjacent to a lot of really lovely, strong people, powerlifters. You know, you work in the circus, you work with a bunch of high performance, high strength athletes. It's a different kind of gym bro circus, but it's a variant. Growing up with some gym bros. And then also it's adjacent to iteration. And I think it's both of those things. When I say rep, what I mean is I trust more than anything else just doing it and getting the chance to get your reps in.
It's time in the lab. It's the amount of time you've spent doing things practically, having to live with the ramifications of the choices you've made, seeing what comes out of it, beginning to understand what you are seeing in the participants. You just can't substitute academic understanding for the practical reality of experience.
For the lived experience, yeah. And I think that in terms of the musculatures of listening, the musculature of empathy, it's how you not only build an individual bell curve for a piece, but it's how you recognize that bell curve. There's a job called standardized patient, where you go into teaching hospitals and you are a patient and your job is to present the symptoms, be a patient, the doctor comes through, and at the end of it, they leave the room, they write up their notes, and then they come back in, and your job is to be able to report how you felt in every moment of the encounter. And to actually talk them through what it feels like to be their patient and to have a conversation with them about what did I notice and how did it make me feel? And that kind of pressing record is a super useful skill. People talk a lot with actors about the capacity to sort of both act and self-direct. But the central skill that I think that you're training doctors in, because it's not, oh, okay, so I just have to say hello, good morning every day, right? It's different for every person. The central skill you're learning there as a doctor is how to tune your thermometer, right? Because you need to be able to check the temperature at any given moment. Not an actual thermometer, but medically that I am sure they have to do, but I don't know anything about that.
That's the easy thing to learn.
I won't say anything about how hard or easy it is to be a fancy plumber, which is what many a doctor has described themselves as to me. But I think that one of the skills of bedside manner is, can you read the room? And are your readings accurate? Or are you one of those cheap oven thermometers that always thinks it's 50 degrees hotter in there than it ever is?
For someone whose work is shrouded in secrecy, Yannick has a lot to say and has some fascinating perspectives after all his years of experience. Do yourself a favor and download episode 7 right now, and hold on tight because it is a wild ride. In episode 8, we welcomed Derek Townsley and Curtis Ratliff, co-founders of the Escape Ventures in Orlando, Florida. Their highly rated room, Bros for Life fraternity heist, brought them wider attention from the escape room community, and when they revealed that they built their next room, Neighborhood Watcher, in 45 days, it truly got our hosts' attention. David and PG wanted to know, how do they produce such quality games in so short a time?
We pride ourselves on our speed. We will always strive to produce the next best. However, for us, that can internally mean next best for us. Mm-hmm. And I'd say above anything else, we are so proud of how quickly we continue to turn things out. So when one game is in final looks and lighting and show running and testing and training with our teams, we're tip-tapping away and creating the design for the next mm-hmm. one. So from the moment we stepped foot in the building, it was the second week of May of 2023. Mm-hmm. Until May of 2024 this past year, that was the whole build out for 3 experiences, mm-hmm. and including a themed lobby that we did have that a part of Port Charlotte's experience down there. From the moment we got in those doors to the moment we said, okay, Port Charlotte's done, it was a full year.
Wow.
And that was building that entire time.
So let's talk about how you build, because you're doing a lot of very cool things very quickly. What is the approach to all this?
We get asked that actually a lot about how our process works with going so quickly.
I'm not surprised you get asked that a lot, because most escape room designers are slow.
And Derek would be slower if I let him. Don't get me wrong. I'm just kidding.
I would be.
I'm not kidding, actually. We do a lot of work on paper. We really do a lot. As soon as we have an idea for an experience, Google Drive folder started with a name, quotation marks, and then we'll just powwow the weirdest ideas, puzzles, characters, story, and we just jumble it all together. And that's usually the first week, give or take. And then after that, Derek's like, all right, I just need to compile all this information. Don't talk to me for 48 hours and we'll figure something out. And then by the time he goes through it, he's usually thinking of a layout of how the space could work. We look at the existing space where we're able to add walls, take away walls, whatever we would really need to do. And then he creates some kind of floor plan for us to follow. And then we usually go into the room and blue tape that floor, go through everything. We do walkthrough, we take notes. I give my critiques, he gives his critiques. It's usually a day of that. And as soon as that day is over, my brother, who we hired 2 years ago, Derek goes, all right, Austin, time to start framing. And we just start framing. And as soon as framing is done, I do all the wiring, which this is where we argue, because before wiring can be done, tech puzzles have to be done. And so it's a lot of going back and forth. But even though we argue, and our lovely team at Escape Ventures will tell you mom and dad like to fight a lot, we work very well together in that we share the same end goal. It's just how we get there is a little different. It's a really fast process. We want to build even bigger games, twice as fast. If you could see what's coming to Orlando next, it'd be crazy. But there are times where we do have to take a step back and be like, hold on. Literally in this past year, we opened Nightfall, Click and Glitch, Phantom Files.
We have 3 consultation projects that opened this past year.
We opened a Western game. We have another one on iDrive opening soon.
Doomsday also opened this year.
Doomsday Disaster, new escape room acquisition.
So in terms of timeline and how it all works, I can't answer. I don't know how it all works. On paper, it shouldn't, but it just somehow does. And I think the key is I start taking notes on my phone. Click and Glitch Arcade Palace, that title, the working title, was sitting on my phone for probably about 3 years. Operation Arctic Storm was the very first game I ever touched. Before Bros, even though it opened 3 years after Bros, it was the first game on paper I ever started. So things are technically always in design mode. I have one list. If anyone gets the password to my phone, we're screwed. But all of the working titles, all of the just themes that's detailed with puzzles and then also rooms. So what puzzle could fit in this room? And from there, it's constantly working. Neighborhood, Ownage, Nightfall. Most of our projects don't happen out of the blue. They're normally in the works, but those 3 specifically are kind of like, these are the constraints. This is what we want to work with now. And it's normally like, okay, Derek, here you go. Start tackling it. So a lot of it, I think at the end of the day, does fall on me. There's an expectation of, in order for all of this to work and everyone to do their part, it ultimately falls on me to be prepared to answer the question, know exactly the page of what wall is going to go where, what puzzle is going to go here, what tech instrument we're going to need, consoles, anything that we need to order ahead of time. That it's so much planning, and it's so much also just like knowing 90% and allowing for 10% in the moment decision making to know what's going to work. Because I think the toughest part of what we do is everything that we do is new. Every product that we produce is new. We haven't reproduced much of anything yet. That it's trial and error. It's being ambitious. It's taking risks, and also saying what's going to be the next big thing that's going to make Escape Ventures stand out.
So to answer your question, we don't know.
Derek and Curtis are recent recipients of the Room Escape Artist Reaction Awards for Best Business Practices. And did I mention that they also opened a trading card store with Curtis's Pokemon-obsessed Nana? It's a story you have to hear to believe. Episode 8 is a must-listen for escape room owners. Oscar van Deventer has designed more than 800 mechanical puzzles, many of which have been documented on his popular YouTube channel. Perhaps the most extreme puzzle on the channel is the 17 by 17 by 17 Rubik's Cube style twisty puzzle. But in episode 9, PG wanted to know more about his experience designing for escape rooms, and his perspective on a perennial topic for escape room owners, puzzle difficulty.
Oscar, you have designed a few escape room puzzles. How do you approach designing specifically for escape rooms?
I don't approach, they approached me. So an escape room operator from Meidrecht, here in Netherlands, Meidrecht Escape, he contacted me via email and he said, well, Oscar, can you design me a puzzle for my escape room? And instead of designing something for him, I first looked whether I already had a design that could be workable. In the past, I had developed the hysteresis key, which is something where you have only one-dimensional motion. You can push the key in and out, and then there is a pin moving up and down through a maze. Of course, it's a maze again, and the object is to solve the maze. But you have to push it in, but not too far, and then pull it out, but not too far, and then push it in, but exactly the same. And when you have done that, you can pull it out. And that's effectively what I did for the escape room. However, there we reversed the maze. So for the mechanical puzzle, the object was to remove the sword. But for the escape room, the object was to enter the sword. Because when you enter the sword, after finding it, obviously, then if you have it all the way in, then something happens. I think a gate opens or something like that.
When I've looked at the designs that you have made for escape rooms, it looks to me like one of the major things that you have designed for is an elegance and ease of reset. Is that a choice that you are making, or is that a happy accident?
That was completely on purpose. The fun thing about the hysteresis maze or my escape room sword is that whenever you pull the sword out of the stone, then immediately you have reset the puzzle. So it's ready to go for the next one. And that was by design. Also, the puzzle is whenever someone gets stuck and gets frustrated and can't get it in further, he can just pull out the sword, the thing automatically resets and you start. And this is a very important feature for anything in an escape room, that the reset is not too hard, because operating an escape room is a lot of work and you want to have your throughput.
Your designs run the gamut from beginner-friendly elegance like fidgets and run all the way up to a level of complexity that I can best describe as casual madness. I cannot comprehend solving a 17 by 17 by 17 twisty puzzle any more than I can imagine infinity. What appeals to you about designing on both extremes?
For me, it's not about the difficulty of solving. I'm a mechanical puzzle designer. And I design for shape, for geometry. And as Brett Rothstein, he is an academic from Bloomington University in Indiana. Brett Rothstein wrote a book on puzzles and puzzle designing, and it's an art form. He calls it the pursuit of difficulty. So, a sculpture. For him, it's the pursuit of shape. For a painter, it's the pursuit maybe of color. For a musician, it's the pursuit of emotion. For puzzle designers, the art form is the pursuit of difficulty. We want to design objects that embody difficulty. And music you listen to, paintings you look at, sculptures maybe you are allowed to touch them, and puzzles you play. So answering your question, it's an art form where I'm exploring all kinds of difficulty, and difficulty has extremes. The one extreme that is very simple and the other extreme very difficult. And actually the most simple of my design, it's called Out of the Box. It has a plank with a round hole and a rectangular hole. And there is a round peg and a rectangular peg. And okay, that's all that you get. There are no instructions. And of course, I'm not going to spoil it for any of you, but the object, I'm not even going to tell you that. Just download it from my website, print it yourself, and enjoy this puzzle. And if you fail this puzzle, you're not allowed to touch anything in my collection.
Wow. A challenge accepted.
Episode 9 is a fantastic one for anyone who owns a 3D printer but doesn't know what to do with it. The amount of puzzles that Oscar makes is truly impressive. Be sure to check out his YouTube channel. When it comes to puzzles, Sandy Weiss has spent his life solving and designing them. He helped invent the online escape room format, embedded puzzles in an office building, and created a Cold War-themed immersive experience that won a Golden Lock Award from Room Escape Artist. But there's one place he's staged an escape room that you may never expect.
So a guy reached out to me and said, I have a friend who's turning 50, and I had this plan to take him and 4 of our closest friends to New York from Chicago on a private jet that I rent, and then go to dinner in New York at Per Se, Thomas Keller restaurant, and then fly home. It'd be like a day adventure.
Casual trip.
Yeah.
I got the wrong friends.
And so he's like, but we're going to have these flights, like 2-hour flights, hour-and-a-half flights from Chicago to New York and back. And while I think we'll all be tired on the way back, on the way there, we're not going to have anything to do. Could you maybe design a game for us that's like a bespoke puzzle game on the jet? I was like, absolutely, I can.
I would love to be bored by flying a private plane.
Well, that's what I said. So me and my assistant Pascal built a game that we were told could last 2 hours, but then it turns out the flight is like an hour and a half. And that's a problem when you design something for one time period, it's cut short by 25%. It was pretty funny. I got to be on the flight, making sure the game ran okay. And like, we're getting closer and he's like, oh, this is going to be a lot shorter than I thought. Do you want him to like circle around the airport for a few laps so they have more time to do the puzzle? I was like, that sounds like an awful excuse to burn fuel because they need puzzles. They have puzzles to solve.
It hadn't occurred to me that you could just ask the pilot to just fly around for a couple extra minutes.
You can do it.
$10,000 worth of fuel to earn you 20 extra minutes of puzzle time.
The more you know.
So we came up with this idea to build like a game around a suitcase. The suitcase was locked. You had to first unlock it. And then inside the suitcase was a bunch of basically like your standard escape room at a table tropes, like a bunch of material, some of which was also individually locked, like a toiletry kit. Some stuff was openable. There were maps and atlases and books and all the things that you would expect in a suitcase turned into a puzzle, including some custom stuff that we did. I made some custom t-shirts for everyone on the plane that said, I flew to New York for Eric's birthday and all I got was this lousy t-shirt. And there were 6 of them and they were all part of one puzzle. Anyway, all this very fun, tactile, bespoke puzzle design. And then the end, the final answer was to tell them, oh, you're going to go to Per Se for dinner because I didn't know that. Months earlier when we're designing it, I was like, we can make the game end there, but we can also make the game end at dinner. And so he thought that was a good idea. So I bought Justin Nevin's Cryptex. So the whole game was leading into unlocking this Cryptex. They didn't know that at the time. And the guy who was my contact at Per Se was like so into this and so friendly. He was like the maitre d' or something.
Professionally friendly.
Well, yeah, exactly. So they got the note that said, going to Per Se. We landed, we took a helicopter tour of Manhattan, and then they were going to Spyscape.
Spyscape is a museum in New York that's dedicated to spycraft and has puzzly escape room undertones with some of the installations that they put in.
So I went to Per Se, found this guy, and he let me set up a fake menu. And then the end game was, in the menu, there were 8 dishes. Each one had a word in quotes. The word in quotes each had a silent letter. And so then there was a note that was presented in front of one of the place settings that I had handwritten. And it gave enough clues to get you to the silent letter bit. You did the silent letter bit. You found the 8 letters said heat note. And I was planning on asking Per Se for candles to be set up. But it turns out they already do that. And the candles are in these little dishes that are just enough perfect amount of height between the top of the dish and the candle flame that you could put a piece of paper at the top and it wouldn't catch fire, but it would get hot. And I had used one of those friction pens that disappear.
Friction pens are the types of pens that we always use when we are puzzling. They are erasable pens, but they erase by applying a little bit of friction with the eraser instead of actually using a traditional eraser. And the ink is heat sensitive and just fades away with a little bit of heat. They're great for puzzling. They're also great for making puzzles.
They're great for being able to tell people I do all of my crossword puzzles in pen.
So all the ink of my note disappears. And what's left over, the letters that were not written in friction, spell ask for salt, because they don't put salt out at a fancy restaurant. I had arranged for the maitre d' to have a note in his pocket. And so when they ask for him to bring him salt, instead he gives them the note, and the note had the final code, and they open up the cryptex, and that's the end of the story. But it was a real treat for me to be able to like conspire with the maitre d' of a very fancy restaurant.
Later in episode 10, Sandy plays an audio game with David and PG based on the Survivor tagline, outwit, outplay, outlast. It's a good time. When you've done 30 escape rooms, you start to develop some opinions. When you've done 300 escape rooms, you can really recognize quality. When you're Sarah Dodd, who has done over 3,000 escape rooms, you're on another level entirely. In episode 11, David took the opportunity to ask Sarah about her long-term hopes and dreams for the escape room industry.
I hope that the escape room industry gets a wider recognition from other industries about the quality of what it offers, of the entertainment that it offers, a greater appreciation for the incredible creations that are made, and that it becomes a regular part of a response when people say, what do you want to do? And by that, what we normally mean when it's, I have spare time, what do you want to do, is what fun would you like to have? What type of play would you like to take part in now? And throughout history, play has been fundamental. I think it's a quote by Salman Rushdie who said that humans are the only species that use play to learn how to communicate and learn the confines of society and learn how to interact with each other. And so are stories. When a baby is born, it asks for kind of food and comfort. And then the third thing is tell me a story. And play, there are instances of play throughout history. I think the first ever thing sold in a box was a board game. And there are board games shown on Egyptian pyramids. Humans play. And escape rooms for me are one of the best ways that adults can play. I think adults don't appreciate how important it is for them to keep playing. And there's a lot of psychology behind that. But I remember being younger and video games were looked down upon by generations that weren't used to it. This is a waste of time and it's frivolous and it's silly and it doesn't teach us anything or do anything for us. And now they're more widely accepted. And I hope for the escape room industry that it goes the same way because, as I say, I think even more than the impact of video games had on me, being able to adventure with friends, to continue to push narrative and explore worlds and ideas and feelings in a safe space is fundamentally important. I hope it continues to grow and I hope that it continues to expand beyond, I think, the confines that we've placed on it. Escape rooms are so much more than a room with locks and boxes or a room with technology where you place things. That's starting to happen, but I just hope that the creators behind the creations just continue to push boundaries and that we all appreciate that.
We couldn't agree more, and that's part of our mission here as well.
Sarah, is there anything that you hope to see change in the escape room world?
I feel really passionate about content warnings. I understand the word trigger warning can be a bit divisive. So perhaps content warning or distressing content warning might be more accepted. But I think it's really important because far too often I've played games with seemingly benign narrative only to find that they've unexpectedly veered into something deeply unsettling. Yes, there are plenty of games that are unsettling on the face of them. You read the blurb and it will say that it might be about a serial killer or a psychopath or a possessed child or a demented nun, but at least I can read that blurb and decide whether that's something or not I want to explore and engage in. But what has happened more recently, and I think more often, and I find it quite shocking, is that sometimes a narrative will shift and twist into something deeply unsettling without any explicit warning. And players, including myself, have been left entirely unprepared for that content. And in some of these rooms, particularly the horror ones, but not always, players are stuck as passive observers to a scene. So some actors are playing out this change, this twist, or this distressing scene, and it leaves players in a difficult position of deciding whether they need to leave the game in the middle of it and seek support. And I think we need to remember that as an industry, the product we make, unlike other forms of passive entertainment, often place players in a protagonist role or a very active role, and that heightens the visceral nature of these experiences. And whilst I'm not necessarily advocating for a formal rating system akin to this, we have for, video games and films. I do think it's vital for us in the industry to prioritize the mental and emotional well-being of our players and customers as much as we try to ensure physical safety. I have heard from a number of players who have come out of a game feeling practically traumatized by being unexpectedly placed in the middle of a story that they would not have otherwise chose to engage with. And as an industry, I think we need to take more responsibility for that.
This is an interesting problem that I broadly agree with you. And at the same time, from an American perspective, this is not something that we readily deal with here. In fact, we don't really deal with this in the United States. This is something that we see when we travel to certain cities in Europe. Particularly, I think Athens, Greece is where I keep hearing about this the most. I do think that there are issues that arise when a community continues to push into deeper and deeper forms of the extreme, because at some point that will reach a breaking point every time.
Listen to episode 11 to hear the incredible story of how Sarah's friends came together to make her favorite movie into an incredible escape room experience just for her. Last year at Recon, the first guest speakers on stage were Francine Boone and Victor Van Doorn from Sherlock in Amsterdam. For REPOD, they joined us in the final episode of the season, where they reflected on the ups and downs of building their most recent game. David kicks off the discussion of The Alchemist.
Congratulations on the overwhelming success of the launch of The Alchemist. I personally, just speaking for myself, played it, loved it, and the fact that it is open has unlocked this REPOD episode for you and for all of our listeners. I'm not a huge fan of superlatives, and my answer to the question, what is your favorite escape room, shifts from moment to moment. But my current most common answer at this moment is The Alchemist.
What? Really?
Truly. It's a wonder factory. It is filled with impossible moments and machines, and it made me weep with joy during the finale each time I watched it, and I think I saw the finale 3 times when I came to visit. I know that I have said this to you before, but I wanted to document saying it to you. I just love this game, and it feels like a vision into the future of what I want escape rooms to be.
Thank you so much.
Wow.
That is very comforting and heartwarming to hear.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the game. Why make something so ambitious?
Speaking personally, in 2019, it could have gone both ways, where we had an offer to be acquired and we explored that. And then while we were having those conversations, something felt off for me. It felt wrong, because I still wanted to make something that we've been talking about for years, which we called the Magic Room. And I wanted to make it in this building. I wanted to make it under the brand of Sherlock. And every time I thought to myself, well, we have this offer now. It's a nice exit, and then everyone can go their way, and I can still make what will become The Alchemist. But something felt wrong with that. And that actually made me want to stay with Sherlock and buy out the other partners at the time. It was not a small thing. So that planted a wish to really make it count with The Alchemist. In 2015, we had the experience of doing something very special with the Vault, which then reverberated throughout the industry, and we enjoyed the fruits of that. But then, of course, it was years later, and yeah, we really had to throw the kitchen sink at it if we wanted to even have a chance at that. Yeah, we started writing down what are all the crazy ideas that we would probably say no to under any other circumstances, but let's see how we can make them work.
Yeah, it really felt like, as in Dutch we would say, you had an egg to lay in this one. I really wanted to support that. And also, just to be honest, we need to challenge ourselves continuously, else we get really bored really quickly. So the ambition is also about challenging ourselves, like what can we make? How cool can we make something? If we get a no, then we want to make it a yes, and these kinds of things. Not in everything in life, but with designing these things, yes. And I really love that we went for it. It's been a really big struggle, and I think it's been Recon that I, for the first time, could feel happy about having done The Alchemist. And also the first time I could hear praise without having to cry. It took a long time. But now I look back on it and I'm like, wow, we made that. And I'm really proud of it. And I think I would not have felt that way if we wouldn't have pushed ourselves to create something that we thought was impossible.
Yeah. So maybe we would still have been near burnout, which we came very close to during this process, which was 4 years long, but maybe not the redemption of it being very close to what we'd imagined.
When I played, I remember speaking to you both the day after we played. I think we grabbed breakfast before Lisa and I caught a flight.
Yeah.
And I could see how delicate you both were, the state that you were in after launching this game. And I remember realizing initially it didn't occur to me because the game, from my perspective, as just a person who walked in and played it and has played your other things, this was a marvel. And it was, to me, very self-evident. And I could tell as I was talking to you both that in different ways, it felt like, Francine, it felt like you were really a little bit haunted by the process you had to go through to get to this place. And for Victor, it felt like you were a little bit haunted by what the game isn't yet, the things you want it to be. And realizing that, I'm glad to hear you both getting to a place where you can appreciate it for what it is, for what you made, which is incredible.
You played a part in that. You and Lisa and Nick Moran playing together and us tinkering with that ending and Nick saying, you just need to add this voiceover and you're done. He actually messaged me the next week, is the voiceover added? I said, yes. Then you're done. Stop working on it.
Which I loved because Victor kept on going in the process.
Yeah, it was not healthy.
Yeah, but it really was true. Like after you played and we had that reflection session, I think both of us, we went home and we talked about it and we both felt, wow, this shifted something major in how we approach this game. So thank you very much for that.
You're very welcome.
We had a conversation about it back then saying, from my perspective, I needed us to stop working on it to get it to a point where it could launch, or that we would be happy with the launch. I needed it to be finished and that we would give it the stamp of finished and then we could continue tweaking. And it was a big psychological thing. And I think your visit helped us do that. And then at Recon, we had another major shift, which was that after speaking, and I think I was talking to Tommy walking to lunch. And then someone asked me, what are you going to make next? And it was the first time that I thought, ooh, I'm actually excited to think of something new now. And it was the first time after launching The Alchemist that I actually felt like, oh, what would I make next? How would I approach that? What would I want to do? And it was really good. Then I thought, nice, I'm back.
Yeah. Until that, the reaction was always, I want to think about it.
Yeah. The next thing I want to make is my bed and climb into it.
Exactly.
Francine and Victor's candor about their struggles with finishing their room and living up to expectations made for a powerful episode to end the season. Have you heard? PG and David have started a second podcast, PG's Playhouse. It's a fun mix of games, interviews, and discussions with many friends and former guests of the Reality Escape pod. In this clip, we join Bill Sunderland and Danny Siller from Escape This Podcast for a game that PG has created to kick off the episode.
It is time for my game. And this one is called Common Grounds. How it'll work is I will give you 4 clues, and you'll need to figure out the common word or theme for each set of clues. It's kind of like the game Connections.
Now, wait, hold on a second here. No. I'm not allowing you to get through with this pro-American nonsense. It's not like the game Connections. It's like the British TV show Only Connect. And I'll have none of this. Oh, the New York Times invented this connecting game that they suddenly came up with out of nowhere. Let's be clear. This is like, in my head, all I'm hearing is and so this is like this is Only Connect. Thank you very much.
We had our first actually of the podcast. This is great.
And to be fair, someone right now is sending me a message being like, actually, in 1910, in this newspaper, they invented the first connecting game. and someone else is correcting them. Oh, there's actually an 1840s novel in which there are 4 words that connect on every line. And so you never know. No one invented
You know
anything.
what? It's about time that Britain got a taste of how it feels to be colonized. That's what I would like to say. We're taking over their games. But back to the game. I'm trying to run a game here, Bill. At the end of that, you'll have 4 sets of clues, and then you will take the answers from that, and you will get a meta puzzle. You will solve the meta puzzle.
Okay. I'm ready.
All right, you ready? The first set is card, sandwich, water, and chalk.
Chalk.
That is card, sandwich, water, and chalk.
Ding, 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 buzz.
Oh, you've got it? Wait, hold on. Don't buzz in. I don't know the answer yet.
As a hint. One of them is a lot darker than the others.
Oh, death chalk. They're all related to... Oh, is it like how in they always like make an outline of sandwiches around a dead body when they find one on the ground?
No, that's what they do after they've done the investigation, and now they want some animals to come in and help with the cleanup, so they've got to entice them in.
You gotta lure them in. No, okay, Danny, what is it?
Board.
It is board, cardboard, sandwich board, waterboard.
Okay, that's the dark one.
And a chalkboard. And Danny got that super fast. All right, set number 2. Landing, mouse, knee, and legal.
Got it.
Got it.
They're all pads.
Of course.
Indeed, you have a landing pad, a mouse pad, a knee pad, and a legal pad. Which was the one that helped you get that?
All of them.
This is
Everything except landing. I wasn't going to get it from landing.
A landing
That's
pad.
why I have it first. You have to put the not obvious ones first. All right, moving on. The third set is letter, mail, link, and reaction.
Cool. Now I have this one. And so therefore we're all fine.
Quite frankly, when I see link and reaction together, I go, oh no, this is going to be something social media related, and I don't use it, so I don't know.
Yeah, the answer was Twitter link, Twitter reaction. It's chain.
That's right.
Chain mail, chain link, chain reaction, and a chain letter.
Good old chain letters.
Good old chain letters. My mom still sends me them sometimes.
Online or physical? I remember physical chain letters.
Online.
That was an exciting time to be a 10-year-old. Getting mail for the first time.
Don't forward chain letters. Just don't do it.
Are you getting the ones where your mum's like, hey, if I don't send this to you, the luck fairy's going to steal all my money and I'll die. I have to send this to 8 people.
The ones that I get have like the forwarded headings, and there's like 10 of them.
Of course.
All right, the last set is blow, corn, C-O-R-N, rabbit, and sink.
Got this one.
High fructose blow syrup.
Nailed it.
It's blow, corn, rabbit, and sink.
Blow, corn, rabbit, sink. Kitchen rabbit.
Rabbit was the one that gave it to me.
Really? I don't know words that go with rabbit other than stew, and that doesn't feel appropriate.
I got it. I finally got it. It took me longer than I wanted to.
Run rabbit. No, I don't know anything that goes with rabbits. I can't think of any rabbit-related words.
You go down these quite often.
That one's hole, blowhole, etc.
Well, rabbits do. I thought of sinkhole, and then I thought rabbit hole. That's nothing. It's legitimately what went through my head. I was like, rabbit holes?
That's not a thing.
Who's ever gone down a rabbit hole? No
Once
one.
you throw away an idea, it is so hard to get it back.
As I'm going back up, if I'd continued on to like, yep, cornhole's a thing, blowhole's definitely a thing, but I had already abandoned the idea by the time of rabbit hole, which clearly is nothing.
Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review PG's Playhouse and the Reality Escape Pod today on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And if you know someone who may enjoy our podcasts, tell a friend. Season 9 of the Reality Escape Pod is shaping up to be one of our best yet, and will be releasing in spring of 2025. This episode of the Reality Escape Pod is produced by Teresa Piazza with support by David Spira and PG Law. This episode was edited by me, Steve Ewing of Stand Inside Media. Music by Ryan Elder, logo by Janine Proct, and all of this is brought to you by RoomEscapeArtist.com, your home for well-researched, rational, and reasonably humorous escape room and immersive gaming content and events.